Hey guys, what's up? It's Dave again. Today I'm doing a breakdown of a recording that I made back in early 2016. It's a cover of the Beach Boys' Wouldn't It Be Nice? And this is going to be a two-part thing. I'm going to do the breakdown of the recording process in this video, and then in the description box there's going to be a link where you can hear the actual recording. Okay, so back in early 2016, a couple of friends of mine were getting married, and they wanted their musician friends to record cover versions of some of their favorite songs. And at their request, we ended up doing Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys. And if you've ever heard this song, it's pretty elaborate. There's a lot of instrumentation on there, kind of unusual instrumentation. There's layers of vocals. Anyway, so I thought it would be a cool challenge to see how much of that actual recording I could reproduce in a home studio with just me and one other person, me playing all the instruments, and do it all on cassette on this machine right here. This is the Tascam 688 Midistudio 8-track cassette recorder. And when I say 8-track cassette, I'm talking about one of these, not an 8-track cassette. It's a regular compact cassette that splits the tape into 8 tracks. And this machine is a very capable machine. In my opinion, this is the pinnacle of cassette multi-track recording. I do most of my original music on this machine. I actually have 2 of these things that I'm hoping will carry me through many years to come without breaking down, which is asking a lot. If you do a good job recording on this, no one would guess that it was done on a cassette. The only way you could ever hope to pull off something like this is to have somewhat of a plan at least. And that's kind of counterintuitive to how I work a lot of the time, but I did kind of plan this out. I scrapped my original idea, which was to do a lot of bouncing on a 4-track to make this happen. That was a little too ambitious. So I actually started on a 4-track. I recorded a scratch track of just acoustic guitar just to guide me through the song. And then on the 2nd track, I did the drums. On the 3rd track, I had a mic'd up bass. On the 4th track, I had a real rhythm guitar part. So, by the way, to make things worse, I really had very, very limited gear to work with at the time. I did not have a good selection of mics. I didn't have this mic yet. I really didn't have any nice mics. All I had was this. I had this SM57. I had a few of these, and I had a couple of 58s that I also used. But I think most of this recording was done with 2 mics, this and a 58. I don't think I used any other mics on this whole song. And kind of the workflow was I would mic it up with this or the 58, run it into my little my old mixer, which was a Yamaha, like a 4-channel mixer that had EQ, and it did have compression, but it was just a 1-knob compressor, which gives you very little control over anything. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, so I mic'd up the drums with this mic right here, and rather than doing it the way that I've discussed in some of my other videos, which is the quote-unquote dick mic or punch mic idea, where you have it in the middle of the kit. I didn't want that sound because that's a very in-your-face, upfront, punchy sound. That doesn't really fit the song, so I decided to do an overhead approach, which gave it a little more space. I mic'd it up, I ran it into the Yamaha, into the tape machine. And I mic'd up the bass with a 58 through a little Fender Champ into the mixer with some EQ into the tape machine. Then the acoustic guitar I had with the 57 into the mixer, into the tape machine. Once I had those 4 tracks filled up, I was doing the math in my head and I realized, I'm going to need more tracks. So I ended up taking that tape, bouncing all of that down to 1 track on the 688. So the drums, bass, and rhythm guitar are 2nd generation bounced down from the 4-track. Then I had 7 tracks left over. And one of the things that you find yourself doing when you're working with a limited number of tracks is you find the little holes in between stuff to put little instrumental parts, like For instance, the background vocals, they come in and out during the song, right? So sometimes in those spaces, I could put some of the keyboard parts, some of the horn parts and stuff like that. And another thing was that I would try to record things at the same time. There was, I think, one of the background parts, I was doing an acoustic guitar part at the same time as we were doing the vocals, mixed a little bit lower, and all going into one track on the machine. So, you're doubling up on your tracks. So some of the guitar stuff, some of the guitar overdubs were done that way. One of the keyboard parts was also done that way. So anyway, I'm pretty sure I allocated about 3, maybe 4 tracks for background vocals. Again, there were other little instrumental parts, in between. The lead vocals, I think, were done on 2 tracks. So both of them ended up being doubled. It was a duet. I sang the first verse, Julia sang the second verse, and then we kind of split up the rest. We did 2 full takes through, and they're both, so my part is doubled, her part is doubled, and I sort of just mixed the double, took the better take, mixed the double a little bit lower. There's a lot of quirky little instrumental parts in this song. Like there's accordion, there's mandolin, there's a 12-string part on the intro, which was actually probably the hardest thing to do because I had to sort of figure out how to emulate a 12-string without having access to a 12-string. So I ended up playing it in octaves and doubling it because I think it's a couple of 12-string guitars on the actual recording. There's some sax parts. There's, I think on the record it's like a glockenspiel or some sort of bells or something. And I think the closest thing I had to that was like a vibraphone sound. All those other sounds came from keyboard. I got the sounds from the Mellotron app. I think it's called the M4000 Mellotron app or something like that on iPad. And you play the things with like an iRig keyboard, and you can dial up the original Mellotron samples. Also, I think I had the Chamberlin library too. So it gives you the saxes, the mandolin parts, there's like a bari sax during, like, I think it's kind of like the pre-chorus. The bari sax just goes, oh. So that was from the Mellotron. There's a sax line that goes, da, 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 da. That was from the Mellotron. I also played that part on an accordion, which was also from, I think it was from the Chamberlin library. Again, keyboard. The mandolin sound was like you would play the chord, but it would be a mandolin doing a tremolo picking. So all that, I also doubled it on a real acoustic guitar to fill it out a little bit. By the way, if you're not familiar with the Mellotron, do a YouTube search for that. It's really a fascinating instrument. What it is tapes that were sampled from real instruments, and when you would play a key, it was playing an actual tape recording of that instrument playing that note. Anyway, so all those sounds came from there. And I think the piano sound actually came from the Garageband app, which was also done with the little iRig keyboard on an iPad. So some of the biggest challenges that I had with this were, first of all, having a limited number of tracks, obviously, having limited gear, and also because we were on a time deadline and we waited to the last minute, we only really had one day to do the vocal parts, and there's a lot of vocal parts. And they're complicated. So we kind of rushed through it, but I did it with the intention of saying, okay, well, maybe we'll come back later and redo our vocal parts, whatever, which now I would love to do because now I do have nicer gear that we can use. I have nicer mics, I've got some outboard compressors and things like that. So I always wanted to go back and redo these vocals, with nicer gear when we had more time to perfect them, but unfortunately, I don't know what I did with the tape that had the tracks on it. So that may or may not ever happen. Instead of mixing it the way I do some of my other songs, which is by transferring the tracks individually into the computer and mixing them on the computer, I mixed it in stereo, analog, using only an Electro-Harmonix Holy Grail reverb pedal as my outboard reverb, and I mixed it straight to stereo into my computer, and I did a sort of do-it-yourself mastering job on the computer. So that's what it ended up being. And again, I always thought, okay, I'm going to go back and remix this by, on the computer with individual tracks, so I have more control and I'll be able to get a much better sound. But again, I don't know where the tape is. One of the challenges when you're doing the mix in analog is that you don't have as much control over each track. Obviously, there's I would have loved to have the ability to compress the vocals individually. It's a very dynamic vocal part, the lead vocal, especially. Because it has these huge melody jumps in it. And when you go up to those high notes, it gets really loud, and then you do the lower parts and it's quiet. It would have been great to have a compressor just on the vocals. I didn't have that at the time. So in the mastering stage, what I was able to do is take a multiband compressor just to the vocal range, the vocal frequency range, and that kind of helped get the vocals under control. But it does affect the sound of your overall mix. There's a really, some trade-offs. But anyway, that's the breakdown of the recording. It was a really ambitious project that I wish I had taken more time to do. But, despite all that, I'm pretty happy with it. So click over, hit the link in the description box, listen to the recording. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions about the recording process, recording on the 688, recording on cassette, just anything, whatever you want to ask me about. Let me know. I'd be glad to do another video or answer your question in the comments. I've got a lot more videos coming up on recording, on some more lessons. I've got some live performances. I've got some original songs. A lot of stuff that's coming up. So please stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. Always remember to like and subscribe. And I will talk to you real soon.